A pirate ship in 1715 hit freezing Atlantic waters. 47 men aboard, zero heating, sub-zero temperatures. By morning, not a single case of hypothermia. The captain's log revealed they'd done something that modern survival experts now say should have killed them all. Sleeping on a pirate ship wasn't uncomfortable. It was survival. Those wooden hulls, just planks. Nothing between you and the Atlantic Ocean but timber that might as well have been cardboard against the cold. Ships in the 16 and 1700s had zero insulation. None. Your average garden shed today is better sealed than a vessel carrying 60 men across freezing waters. Below deck, temperatures drop to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes colder in northern waters. And here's what most people get wrong. That was actually the good spot. Above deck, you'd freeze solid within hours. But wait, it gets worse. Pirates slept in 4-hour shifts. Your body would just start warming up, just start relaxing into something resembling rest, and boom, someone's kicking your hammock, your turn on watch. So you drag yourself up, never fully rested, never fully warm, and stand in winds that cut through wool like it was tissue paper. I genuinely cannot imagine doing this for months. I complain when my bedroom drops below 65. Here's something wild, though. A sailor's core temperature could drop 2 to 3 degrees during a single night's sleep. That's mild hypothermia. Regularly. These men lived in a constant state that would send modern doctors into panic mode. And many pirates came from the Caribbean. They'd never experienced real cold until they started raiding northern shipping lanes. One day, you're sweating in Jamaica. The next, you're shivering off the coast of Massachusetts, wondering why your fingers stopped working. Unlike naval ships with their strict military schedules, pirate crews actually voted on watch rotations. Democracy happening in a dark, freezing hold while men argued over who had to go topside into the wind. But the orlop deck? That's where things got interesting. The orlop deck was the basement of the ship, the absolute bottom floor where no sane person would want to sleep. Except pirates did, every single night. Here's why it actually made sense. The orlop sat below the waterline, and seawater holds a steady 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit even when the air above turns brutal. That wooden hull, it became a passive warming barrier between you and the freezing wind. My grandfather used to say the smartest people take the ugliest solutions. He was talking about his marriage, but it applies here too. No windows down there, no portholes, just a dark, coffin-like space that trapped whatever body heat existed. 30 men breathing in one cramped area creates warmth. Disgusting warmth, but warmth nonetheless. And the rats? Oh, there were rats. Hundreds of them. But here's the weird part. Pirates tolerated these furry little demons because dozens of warm rodent bodies actually raised the ambient temperature slightly. Free heating, if you could stomach the company. The trade-off was brutal, though. Air quality in the orlop was atrocious. Men breathed the same stale air thick with sweat, mold, and bilge stench. You could practically chew the atmosphere. Some sailors claimed they could taste what the cook made for dinner 3 days ago just by inhaling. Still, many pirates preferred this darkness. Why? Because it helped them sleep during chaotic day shifts when the deck above thundered with activity. Makes sense, right? You work nights, you need darkness during the day. The orlop provided that accidentally, but sleeping in the ship's basement was just survival basics. The real prize? Getting injured at exactly the right time, because sick pirates discovered something the healthy ones envied desperately. Here's the thing about pirate ships. Everyone was cold, but not everyone was equally cold. The sick bay sat in the most protected spot below deck, usually tucked right next to the galley. Warm air from the cooking fire drifted in. Drafts couldn't reach it, and the ship's surgeon kept extra blankets stockpiled like they were gold coins. If you were genuinely injured or sick, you got placed here for recovery. Made sense. A freezing man can't heal. His body burns calories just staying alive instead of fixing wounds. But pirates figured this out fast. A minor cut on your hand? That could mean 2 or 3 nights wrapped in wool blankets, surrounded by warm air instead of shivering on the orlop deck with 40 other men breathing on each other. So they started faking it. Sailors would deliberately pick at healing scabs. They'd swallow soap to induce vomiting. Some would stick their hands in cold water for hours to make their skin look pale and sickly. One ship's log from 1703 mentions a pirate who claimed to have mysterious stomach pains every single time the ship entered northern waters. The surgeons weren't stupid, though. They'd seen every trick. Poke a man who claims his leg is broken. Check if his fever disappears when rum is offered. But here's where it gets interesting. During the worst cold snaps, many surgeons just looked the other way. Why? Because a warm pirate could work. A frozen one couldn't. If letting a few malingerers into the sick bay kept the crew functional, that was practical medicine. The sick bay was valuable real estate, and pirates would do almost anything to claim it. But what if you could heat the entire ship instead? Here's where things get clever. Ships carried tons of ballast stones in their lowest holds. These heavy rocks kept the vessel stable, stopped it from tipping over in rough seas. Standard sailing stuff. But some crews figured out these stones could do double duty. During shore stops, pirates would build massive fires on the beach. They'd heat large stones until they were nearly red hot, then carefully load them back into the ballast. Sounds crazy, right? Heating rocks on a wooden ship? But it worked. Those heated stones could radiate warmth for 8 to 12 hours straight. The cargo hold became a primitive heated space, almost like sleeping on a warm floor. Not exactly a luxury hotel, but when you're facing hypothermia, a toasty rock feels like paradise. And this wasn't some pirate invention. The trick came from Scandinavian fishing traditions going back to the Vikings. Northern sailors had been doing this for centuries before Caribbean pirates ever caught on. Knowledge travels weird paths across the ocean. Now, the risks were real. Too many hot stones could warp hull planking or straight up start fires. Several ships were actually lost this way. Greed for warmth sinking entire vessels. There's a lesson there somewhere, but the stones served another purpose too. Pirates would pile heated ballast near their water barrels during Arctic runs. Why? Drinking water freezes solid in extreme cold. Nothing worse than being surrounded by ocean but dying of thirst because your fresh water turned into ice blocks. So ballast stones became heating systems, water warmers, and stability weights all in one. Pretty efficient for a bunch of rocks. But here's the thing about heat sources on a ship. There was one spot that had actual fire burning daily, and men would literally bribe their way to sleep near it. The ship's galley was basically a bonfire sitting inside a floating matchbox, and everyone wanted to sleep next to it. The cooking area had this brick-lined firebox called a caboose. Fancy name for the only legal flame on a ship made entirely of stuff that burns really, really well. We're talking wood, rope, tar, canvas. One spark in the wrong place, and you've got a funeral pyre sailing at 4 knots. But here's the thing. Pirates didn't care about fire regulations. They'd bribe the cook with extra rum rations just to curl up near that stove for a few hours, totally against the rules. Completely worth it. The cook became one of the most popular men aboard, not because his food was any good, but because he controlled access to warmth. Now, rough weather changed everything. Waves tossing the ship around. That fire gets extinguished immediately. No debate. A sliding ember during a storm could ignite the whole vessel in minutes. So the coldest nights were often the stormiest, when you needed heat most but couldn't risk having any. Clever crews found a workaround. They used slow match, which was rope soaked in saltpeter that smoldered for hours without an open flame. Enough heat to keep hands from going numb. Not enough to sink the ship. Usually, the galley stove burned through about 20 pounds of wood or coal every single day. That's a lot of fuel to store on voyages lasting months. Some captains planned entire routes around where they could resupply firewood. And the really fancy pirate ships? They installed copper-lined bases under their stoves. Copper conducts heat beautifully, spreading warmth into the surrounding deck planks. Those copper warm spots became prime real estate. But warmth meant nothing if the ship itself was letting in freezing drafts everywhere. Here's the thing about wooden ships. They leaked air like a screen door on a submarine. Every single plank had gaps. Every joint shifted with the waves. Cold wind found its way through cracks you couldn't even see. So before heading into freezing waters, pirates had to basically weatherproof their entire vessel. And the main weapon? Hot pine tar. Crews would heat this stuff to around 200 degrees Fahrenheit, then slather it into every deck seam they could reach. The tar hardened into an airtight seal that blocked those icy drafts sneaking through the planks. But fair warning, this process stunk. Like really stunk. The smell soaked into your clothes, your hair, your skin. Weeks later, you'd still catch whiffs of it. My grandfather worked in a shipyard, and he said old sailors could identify tar-treated vessels by smell alone from 50 feet away. The whole tarring job took 2 or 3 days in port. Not glamorous, not exciting, but absolutely necessary if you wanted to survive a northern winter. Then there were tarpaulins, canvas screens hung below deck to block wind channels. Fun fact, that's actually where our word tarp comes from. Pirates basically invented the camping gear aisle at your local hardware store. But they didn't stop there. Crews stuffed oakum into every crack, crevice, and knothole. Oakum was just loose rope fibers soaked in tar, and pirates shoved it anywhere cold air might penetrate. Some crews went even further, nailing sailcloth over entire deck sections. These crude insulated rooms could run 15 degrees warmer than open areas. Still, all this sealing created a new problem. You've blocked the cold air, sure, but you've also trapped everything else inside, including the heat source pirates valued most. Here's where pirates got genuinely clever and a little gross. They poured seawater between the deck planks on purpose. I know, sounds insane. You're on a ship trying not to sink, and these guys are adding water? But here's the thing. Ocean water holds a steady 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. When the air above is dropping into the 20s, that seawater acts like a liquid blanket. The physics actually works. Cold air wants to suck heat straight through wooden planks. But water resists temperature change. It's stubborn. So a thin layer of seawater becomes a buffer zone between you and frostbite. Some captains took this even further. They'd allow controlled leaks in the lower holds, just enough to keep a shallow layer sitting above the bilge. Not enough to cause problems, well, not immediately. And where'd this bizarre trick come from? Dutch fishermen. Those guys had been surviving North Sea winters for generations before pirates ever thought of it. They'd figured out that a wet ship was sometimes a warm ship. Pirates raided Dutch vessels, stole their cargo, and apparently stole their survival hacks too, but balance was everything. Too much water and you're risking capsizing, or hull rot, or waking up floating in your own sleeping quarters. Too little and the cold cuts right through. So pumping schedules became temperature dependent. Crews would let water accumulate during the coldest night hours, then drain it at dawn when temperatures rose. Like a thermostat, a really terrible, labor-intensive thermostat that required 4 men working a hand pump. Still, desperate times call for deliberately flooding your own ship. Speaking of desperate measures, pirates also believed they could warm themselves from the inside out with rum. They were mostly wrong about that. Here's the thing about pirates and rum. They were convinced it warmed them up. Dead wrong. Alcohol actually makes you lose heat faster. When you drink, your blood vessels dilate. Blood rushes to your skin. You feel warm, sure, but that heat is escaping your body like passengers fleeing a sinking ship. So why did every pirate drink like his life depended on it? Because mentally, it worked. Rum dulled the misery. It helped men fall asleep when their bones ached from cold and their hammocks felt like sheets of ice. Sometimes surviving isn't about science. It's about getting through the night without losing your mind. Standard Navy sailors got grog, watered down rum, basically rum that went to finishing school. Pirates? They drank theirs straight. Half a pint daily was normal. Some crews went through more rum than fresh water. But here's where it gets interesting. Hot grog actually did provide real warmth. Rum mixed with boiling water, sugar, and lemon created genuine temporary heat in your stomach and chest. The key word is temporary. 20 minutes later, you're cold again and reaching for another cup. And the drinking created a vicious cycle. Chronic alcohol use led to malnutrition. Malnourished bodies can't generate heat efficiently, so pirates drank to feel warm, which made them less capable of being warm. My grandfather would have called that borrowing from tomorrow to pay for today. The morning tot became sacred. That first hit of rum at sunrise shocked frozen bodies back to life. Men who'd spent 8 hours shivering in damp wool suddenly felt human again. Feeling warm and being warm are completely different things. Speaking of things that actually worked, wool was a pirate's real best friend. Wool was the real secret weapon against cold. Not rum, not bravery. Wool. Here's why pirates obsessed over it. Cotton and linen become useless when wet. They actually pull heat away from your body. Wool? It keeps you warm even when soaking wet. Fishermen had known this for centuries. Pirates just stole their wisdom along with their cargo. But plain wool wasn't enough for a serious pirate. Rub sheep lanolin or whale oil directly into the fabric. This created a water-resistant coating that sealed warmth inside. Basically, they invented the world's first waterproof jacket. It smelled absolutely terrible, like wet sheep rolled in fish guts. Nobody cared. Warmth beat fashion every single time. And speaking of fashion, here's where piracy got interesting. Successful pirates didn't just steal gold and jewels. They grabbed fine woolen coats from merchants, fur-lined cloaks from wealthy passengers, even silk undergarments from aristocrats. I've read ship inventories where pirates specifically listed one gentleman's wool greatcoat as valuable plunder, right next to the silverware. A single quality wool blanket was worth a full share of lesser loot. Men actually included blankets in their wills. That's how precious warmth became. Then there were Monmouth caps. These thick knitted wool caps covered ears, foreheads, and necks. Critical design choice. Your head loses massive amounts of body heat when exposed. A good cap could mean the difference between sleeping and shivering all night. The coldest, most experienced pirates looked absolutely ridiculous. Spanish wool coat, French fur collar, English wool stockings, Dutch knitted cap. They were walking museum exhibits of stolen European fashion. But even the finest stolen clothing couldn't fight nature forever, which is why smart pirates had another strategy entirely. They simply refused to stay in cold waters at all. Here's the thing nobody tells you about pirates. They weren't stubborn idiots. When November hit and temperatures dropped, smart pirates did exactly what birds do. They flew south. Simple as that. The famous pirate round wasn't just some random route sailors made up after too much rum. It was a 10,000-mile circuit between the Caribbean and Madagascar, carefully designed around one principle: stay warm or die. Caribbean pirates treated northern waters like a summer vacation. They'd raid up the American coast in June, July, August. Then by October, gone. Headed back south like clockwork. My grandfather used to say, "Only fools argue with winter." Pirates figured that out 300 years ago, and the numbers prove it worked. Historical records show pirate attacks in southern waters absolutely exploded between November and March. Meanwhile, northern shipping lanes got suspiciously quiet. Coincidence? Not even close. Now here's where it gets brutal. Some crews ignored this wisdom. Pirates who decided to overwinter in places like Canada suffered casualty rates above 40%. Not from battles, not from disease, just cold. Pure, merciless cold. 40%. That's nearly half your crew dead because someone wanted to chase one more prize before heading south. The smartest captains understood something crucial. A successful pirate wasn't just good with a cutlass, he was a practical weatherman, reading wind patterns, tracking temperature changes, knowing exactly when to abandon cold hunting grounds. Treasure maps are romantic, but honestly, a good understanding of seasonal migration patterns probably saved more pirate lives than any buried gold ever could. So when you picture pirates, forget the guy standing in a blizzard. The real ones were already sipping rum somewhere warm, watching the snow from a very comfortable distance.